When Oliver noticed a sharp pain in his feet and realized he had stepped on a suspicious-looking stone, he didn't give it much thought. But upon closer inspection, he saw that this was no ordinary stone. He thought he had discovered something extraordinary. Oliver made the decision to bring the stone to a jeweler with the idea of selling it for a large sum of money. His life will be forever altered by this. But before we start, make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Oliver was limping because of the severe pain in his foot. A lifeguard then approached him and inquired as to his well-being. Oliver eventually revealed his discovery to the lifeguard. The stone began to glow as soon as he opened his hand. The lifeguard requested permission to examine the stone. Despite his hesitation, Oliver handed the lifeguard the object. The stone stopped glowing as soon as I handed it over. The lifeguard was taken aback. Oliver was given permission by the lifeguard to keep the stone. Oliver sighed in relief. However, he would later come to regret it. Oliver made the decision to visit a jeweler he is familiar with. He currently only truly trusts this one person. Oliver turned up at Mark's jewelry store in a flash. When Mark saw Oliver, he was taken aback. Oliver began babbling nonsense about the extremely rare stone he was trying to sell. At first, Mark did not believe Oliver, but he decided to accept it. Oliver held a glowing stone, but Mark thought it was just a cheap stone from a gift shop. But the stone abruptly stopped glowing when Oliver gave it to Mark. At first, Mark was utterly perplexed, but then he understood. He needed time, though. Once the gem had undergone thorough examination and testing, Mark received a comprehensive gemological report. The report detailed the gem's physical properties, including its hardness, refractive index, and specific gravity. The discovery of the stone startled Mark. Oliver was aware of that. Mark appeared to have recognized something. Oliver was informed by Mark that he would need a day to look into and authenticate the stone. Despite his hesitation, Oliver accepted these conditions. The entire night, Oliver was restless. The stone preoccupied him constantly. There's a chance it's worth a lot of money. Oliver returned to the Mark the following day. As he entered the dimly lit shop, a shiver ran down his spine as he noticed the gemologist standing behind the counter, wearing a peculiarly creepy smile. He greeted Mark, his voice trembling slightly, and politely asked for his glowing gem back. However, as Mask handed the gem to Oliver, a sinking feeling settled in his stomach. Soon after the conversation began, Mark began acting suspiciously. He forbade Oliver to touch or look at the stone. There was a huge argument between Oliver and Mark. Mark refused to even show Oliver his stone when Oliver asked for it back. Since there were now more customers in the store, Oliver cooled off a little. Mark handed Oliver a stone. As soon as Oliver got into his car, he had the unsettling feeling that he was being watched. Whatever it took, he had to keep the stone safe. But what came next was something Oliver had never anticipated. Mark glanced at his rearview mirror and noticed the van trailing closely behind him. Anxious thoughts raced through Mark's mind as he considered his options. Should he confront the van? Should he call the authorities? With a surge of adrenaline, Mark took a deep breath and pressed down on the accelerator, maneuvering his car through the streets with precision. He navigated through narrow alleys and back streets, taking advantage of shortcuts and hidden paths. By using his wits, Oliver evaded the van that had been following him. That he had discovered something truly remarkable was now beyond any doubt. But he had to get rid of it quickly, and yet he kept worrying about his finances rather than his own safety. Tomorrow, Oliver would take this stone to a different jeweler in an attempt to sell it. The hour was late, and there was no longer a working jeweler among them. When Oliver got back, he found a large crowd waiting for him outside his house. Before this, he had no idea what was happening, but now he saw it. Oliver's neighbor recognized him and warned him not to go in. When Oliver gets home, the first thing he notices is the shattered state of his front window. If one looks closely enough, one can see that his front door has also been broken into. To no avail, Oliver did not heed anyone's warnings and entered anyway. The cops did not want to be called if there was no evidence of theft. However, Oliver insisted they come to report. An officer arrived 30 minutes after the initial call. Within the confines of the police car, there was a solitary officer. As Oliver investigates, he gets the impression that something is not right. Oliver reports the burglary in great detail. But to his astonishment, the police officers just get back into his car and drive off without even taking a look. It seems strange that no one was taking him seriously. What's the deal here? After much consideration, Oliver has decided to remove the stone. He plans on visiting a jewelry store first thing in the morning. Right when the jeweler opened his doors, Oliver was there. It's as if the jeweler is waiting for him when he walks in the door. He was welcomed warmly and greeted right away. Perhaps Mark had mentioned the stone to the jeweler, or else there was something else going on behind Oliver's back. The gem dealer requested Oliver's opinion on the stone. His shock at the sight of the stone was Oliver's first clue that he was on to something. There was no light emanating from the stone. After that, Oliver was invited to feel it by the jeweler. Instantly upon Oliver's touch, the stone began to emit a bright light. At that point, the jeweler made a very generous proposal. Oliver thought he'd died and gone to heaven. He'd be able to sell the stone and collect a tidy sum. However, the situation would quickly deteriorate. Since Oliver was so content, he relaxed his guard. He told the jeweler he took the deal without giving it much thought. The jeweler then promised to retrieve the funds from safekeeping. However, a lot of time was required for this. It appeared as though the jeweler took a great deal of time with each piece. The curious Oliver rapped on his office door. When Oliver walked in, he was immediately glared at by a man who was already inside the shop. Even though he didn't know it at the time, Oliver felt like he was constantly being watched. When Oliver came to, he found himself on the floor. A person had ambushed him from behind. The jeweler returned to reassure the man that Oliver was indeed the man they sought. Weeping commenced in Oliver. Minutes passed before Oliver realized the FBI was on their way. It was unclear to Oliver why they were on his trail, but he suspected it was related to the stone. After Oliver's arrest, the law enforcers informed him of his right to remain silent. Oliver did not understand what was going on because he was so befuddled. When did he get arrested? The closest FBI office was where he was taken. When he walked into the office, everyone looked at him as if he were a dangerous criminal. Otherwise, Oliver would spend the rest of his life behind bars if he didn't straighten out his story. The stone greeted him the second he stepped out of the door. Questions about the source and his collaborators' identities were posed to him. He was pressed for information about his cohorts. The lineup participants did not seem to know Oliver and were taken aback by his presence. The officers told Oliver it wasn't a joke when he asked if it was all a big joke. He claims he doesn't recognize anyone there. Once he's collected himself, he tells the police he's ready to tell them the whole truth about where he got the stone. The police were intrigued and said they would bring him back to question him further. Oliver begins to explain his perspective. While out surfing, he came across the stone. When he put his weight on it, his feet immediately began to hurt. The scar on his foot was on full display. The cops decided to trust him and head down to the shore to look into the situation. The police took Oliver back to the beach so he could point out the exact spot where he'd found the stone. Oliver made a clumsy gesture in the general direction of where he had discovered the stone. Rapidly, a large number of police officers began looking into the situation. Thankfully, Oliver ran into the lifeguard he had previously spoken with. A lifeguard has agreed to speak with police. He provided Oliver with an alibi to ensure that he did not steal the stone. After that, the officers began to confide in Oliver once more and fill him in on the stone's status. The gem was taken last week during a major diamond heist. It was possible that Oliver would be exonerated. Thanks to the footprints left on the sand and the increased number of people who discovered stones, the real thieves were identified. In their attempt to escape with the stolen diamonds, the hijackers jumped out of the plane and lost some of the precious stones in the water. All of Oliver's losses were covered by the insurance company.